It's time for us to be honest about some of these UFC fighters and how they've handled their careers so far. And some of these champions and so-called top contenders right now are actually hurting the UFC instead of helping it out. Whether it be their fight style, their activity, or even the way they handle themselves outside of the octagon, some of these fighters nowadays just don't do good business for the UFC. And as a product that we have, that we watch every single weekend, we need the UFC to be good. I feel like right now, as the UFC stands, it's on a decline. We are definitely not in the golden age of the UFC, and I think that time has passed. And with a lot of high-profile people advocating for an increase in fighter pay, it feels like these fighters have an incentive to sit out on the sidelines and not give us fans a product that we deserve every single week. And so I've taken it upon myself to go through the rankings, go through the roster, and find some of these champions and these top contenders who are currently hurting the UFC right now with some of their decisions that they've made in the past or present. So let's not waste any more time and let's dive right into these fighters who are currently hurting the UFC with their actions. Starting off with, we have Islam Makhachev. Now, Islam is a great champion. Don't get me wrong. I am not hating on what he's done in the octagon so far. Beating Oliveira, great win. Beating Volk twice, great win. In my opinion, Islam right now is the lightweight GOAT of the sport. He is the best lightweight to ever do it, even better than Khabib. I know that can be kind of a sensitive topic, but I think what Islam has done so far in his championship reign has been better than what Khabib has. But there's one issue that I have with Islam, and it's kind of his fight style, but it's not really his fight style. I think the main issue that I have with him is the fact that he is incredibly inactive. This guy is only fighting in Abu Dhabi. He is not fighting anywhere else. He sits out on the sidelines for as long as he can so that he can ensure that he makes weight. We will never see Islam Makhachev take a fight on somewhat short notice, and maybe that's fine because he's a champion. But one thing that I really rate about champions, this is why I like Volk so much, is the fact that when champions are active, they make the sport better. When champions are fighting every 3, 4, 5 months at the most, it makes the UFC entertaining and it gets me hype for every single pay-per-view that comes, because if every single champion was active like Volk, then we would have the most stacked fight nights, the most stacked pay-per-views every single month. But with fighters like Islam, who only fights one time per year and they need like a 6-month notice before they even fight their next contender, it makes things very difficult for the UFC to plan out future pay-per-views that involve Islam Makhachev. They really have to sit back and plan 6 months in advance before they even get an Islam fight. So they have to make sure that there's some new contender, but there always is more contenders. And what this kind of creates for a lot of fighters in the UFC or champions in the UFC is more contenders than there needs to be. It causes a logjam in the division. So that leaves us stuck with guys who are sitting at the top of the division who have a claim to a title shot, but they're going to sit out and wait for it and not fight each other to get that title shot, to be the only one to have it. So now we have multiple fighters at the top of lightweight who have a claim to the title, Sarukian, Gaethje, Oliveira. And so now that kind of leaves us in a position where Gaethje has to sit out for a whole year. We don't see Gaethje because he's not willing to take a fight in the meantime because he doesn't want to lose his shot at the title. And we're left with no Gaethje for an entire year while Sarukian and Oliveira duke it out for that title shot. Which leads me into my next point involving Gaethje. He's not supposed to be a part of this video, but I might as well talk about him anyways. But Gaethje is so inactive. He fights once a year. It's just tough, man. This guy is willing to sit out for a whole year to earn his title shot. Earn in quotation marks if I'm being honest with you, but he's willing to sit out for an entire year, but he can fight somebody in the meantime. I would not mind Gaethje on a pay-per-view card. I would not mind Gaethje headlining a fight night. We need better fight nights, but he can fight some guys at lightweight right now, but he just chooses not to because he doesn't want to lose his shot at the title if he manages to lose to anybody. It's a risk. I understand why he's not taking the risk of fighting a contender while he waits for Islam to fight the winner of Oliveira and Sarukian. But it just seems like as a product, he's leaving money on the table for himself, the UFC, and he's hurting the fans because now we don't have to see Gaethje for a whole year, and that kind of blows. I want to see Gaethje more often in the UFC. I want to see him fight 2 to 3 times a year, but we don't get to see him because he wants to sit out and wait for the title shot. And if fighter pay was really that bad, if it was that horrendous, I think we would see Gaethje more often because he would need money. But I think he's pretty well off right now if he's only fighting once, twice a year at best. And moving on to another fighter who also has this inactivity problem, that is Khamzat Chimaev. This guy only fights once a year as well. What happened to the old Chimaev? Chimaev used to be so active in the UFC. He was fighting both in middleweight and welterweight just so that he could fight. This guy just wanted to fight for fun. But now it seems like he's having really bad visa issues. I think his relationship with Kadyrov has really put a hamper on his relationship with the UFC. And now he can only fight outside of the US, and that blows. And what makes this worse is the fact that Chimaev calls out everybody on the planet Earth. You could be a 205er, you could be a heavyweight, you could be a flyweight for all I care. Chimaev has probably called you out at some point on Twitter, and we're not getting anything from him. He calls people out left and right, and so we're thinking, okay, this is the fight to make. Chimaev just called them out, but guess what? He can't fight them because he can't get a fight in the US. And not only that, he's also calling out guys at welterweight, and I don't think he can even make welterweight at this point. So not only can he not fight anybody at 170 because he can't make 170, but he can't also fight them because he can only fight in Abu Dhabi or somewhere in the Eastern Hemisphere. He can only fight someplace that will allow him to fight, and this hurts the UFC. So now he's only resided to fighting once a year in Abu Dhabi or some other country outside the US. And if he could fight in the US, we could have had like 3, 4, 5 Chimaev fights by now. He could be a UFC champion at this point because the active Chimaev would already be champion. Obviously, if he can't beat those guys, because we don't know how good Chimaev truly is at middleweight just yet. It seems like he has a gas tank issues. Can he beat a Whitaker at middleweight? Can he beat a Paulo Costa? Can he beat a Cannonier, an Adesanya, a Strickland even? Who knows what can happen with Chimaev? But if he does manage to beat those guys, we could have had a good championship reign. He can already have 1 or 2 title defenses underneath of his belt. But no, we don't get to see Chimaev ever because he can't fight in the US. So every single potential matchup that you can see happening for Chimaev probably won't happen. Every single call that he does probably won't happen. And that is bad for the UFC because Chimaev is a big name. He is a guy who can sell some pay-per-views because he is entertaining. He does talk some trash. He does have antics outside the octagon that can bring some attention his way, but we can't see him ever. And he kind of just falls off slowly into oblivion or into the atmosphere because we just kind of forget about Chimaev sometimes because he's never fighting. And so that's one more potential star crossed off the list for the UFC. We need somebody to replace Conor McGregor when he officially retires, and it won't be Chimaev because he just can't fight often enough. So that is my list of current fighters who are currently hurting the UFC with their inactivity. Sorry for the weird cut. My hair might look a little bit different. It's actually the next day. I had a whole little section involving Jon Jones, but it didn't really make too much sense to mix this in with the other 3 fighters. So I kind of made the video more specific, if you know what I mean. I don't know. It's kind of a ranty style video, but hopefully you did enjoy it. And if you did enjoy it, leave a like down below, maybe subscribe to the channel, hit that bell icon for notifications as well. I'm out of here, guys. I'll see y'all tomorrow. I will be posting my Ian Gary versus Jeff Neal prediction and then the full card prediction probably Friday night. So stay tuned for those videos. But for now, I'm out of here. Peace.